King's Landing 577 AC. King's Landing. Third-person POV. 2 days after Queen Alysanne's return to King's Landing, the small council convened. The familiar setting of the council chamber, with its heavy oak table and the weight of royal history hanging in the air, felt both comforting and constricting after the open spaces of the north. King Jaehaerys sat at the head of the table, his silver-gold hair neatly trimmed, his gaze sharp as he surveyed the assembled members. To his immediate right sat Queen Alysanne, the journey to the north having left a thoughtful cast on her features. To the king's left was Prince Aemon Targaryen, the heir to the Iron Throne and the Master of Laws, his expression serious and attentive. Directly across from the king sat Hand of the King, Septon Barth, his presence lending a sense of solemnity to the proceedings. The remaining seats were filled by the other key figures of the realm. Lord Lyman Beesbury, the Master of Coins, his fingers often drumming nervously on the table. Lord Mafride Redwyn, the Master of Ships, his gaze often distant as if contemplating naval matters. Prince Baelon Targaryen, the king's second son and the Master of Whispers, his eyes sharp and observant, missing little, and Grand Maester Bennifer, his aged face a mask of scholarly wisdom. The air was thick with unspoken expectations, the weight of the kingdom resting upon their deliberations. Once the routine reports from across the 7 kingdoms had been delivered, news of harvests, minor disputes, and the general state of affairs, a lull fell over the table. King Jaehaerys turned his gaze towards his queen, a gentle inquiry in his violet eyes. "And now, my dear Alysanne," he prompted, "tell us of your journey to the north. We have received ravens detailing your arrival and stay at Winterfell, but we are eager to hear your first-hand account." "My lords," Queen Alysanne began, her voice resonating with the experiences of her recent journey, "my tour of the north was unlike any I had undertaken before. The sheer scale of the land and the resilience of its people left a lasting impression." She recounted their travel northward, emphasizing the marvel of the northern railway system. The journey by train, a relatively recent innovation in the north, was remarkably efficient, she explained, her ladies-in-waiting nodding in agreement. To traverse such vast distances with such speed, powered by steam and steel, was a testament to northern ingenuity. It facilitated travel and trade in a way I had not fully appreciated. Alysanne then spoke of her visit to the College of Winterhold, her tone filled with genuine admiration. "This newly established institution is a beacon of learning in the north," she declared. "Their commitment to knowledge, both theoretical and practical, is truly commendable. I was particularly struck by their dedication to making education accessible through their printing press, allowing for a wider dissemination of vital texts." She elaborated on the college's curriculum, noting the breadth of subjects taught, from history and philosophy to mathematics and the nascent study of engineering. "They foster a spirit of inquiry and innovation," Alysanne observed, "and their integration of martial training alongside academic pursuits reflects the unique demands of life in the north. It is an institution that holds immense potential for shaping the future leaders and thinkers of the region." Turning her attention to their journey further north, Alysanne described their arrival at the Wall. "The Wall," she stated, her voice hushed with awe, "is a spectacle unlike any other. Its sheer scale is difficult to comprehend until one stands in its shadow. It is a testament to an age long past, a stark reminder of the ancient threats that necessitated its construction." She spoke of their ascent to the wall's summit, painting a vivid picture of the breathtaking vista and the vast, untamed lands stretching out to the north. "To stand atop that icy barrier," Alysanne recounted, "and gaze into the wild unknown, truly underscores the vital role of the Night's Watch." Here, her tone shifted, becoming more serious. "Under the command of Lord Commander Demeric Snow, the Brothers of the Night's Watch maintain a vigilant watch against the remnants of the free folk and more sinister entities that still lurk beyond the wall. Their dedication to their duty, despite their dwindling numbers, is unwavering." Alysanne then recounted the perplexing incident with Silverwing, her brow furrowing slightly. "My dragon, who has never hesitated to fly wherever I command, refused to cross the wall," she revealed, her words drawing the rapt attention of the small council. "He flew towards it, but then inexplicably turned back, a deep reluctance emanating through our bond. Lord Theon Stark posited that ancient magic woven into the wall itself might be the cause, a theory that warrants further consideration." She concluded her account of the North with a reflection on the resilience and self-reliance of its people, the challenges they faced, and the potential for greater understanding and cooperation between the North and the Crown. Her words painted a comprehensive picture of a region both formidable and fascinating, leaving the small council with much to ponder. King Jaehaerys leaned forward, his brow furrowed with concern, his violet eyes fixed intently on Alysanne. "My dear," he said, his voice carrying a note of gravity, "this matter of Silverwing refusing your command, it troubles me. You have always described him as a docile and obedient dragon, your bond with him seemingly unbreakable. For him to defy you so directly, and at such a significant boundary as the wall, suggests a power at play that we do not fully comprehend. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the assembled council. Has Silverwing ever exhibited such disobedience before? Any reluctance to follow your will? Alyssane shook her head slowly, her own unease mirrored in her expression. Never, Your Grace. Silverwing has always been responsive to my commands, even across vast distances. Our bond is strong, and I have never encountered such a firm resistance from him. It was not a mere hesitation, it was a deliberate refusal to proceed north of the wall. Lord Theon's suggestion of ancient magic within the wall itself is intriguing, King Jaehaerys mused, stroking his beard thoughtfully. The histories speak of powerful spells woven into its construction, wards against the darkness. Perhaps these enchantments have an effect on creatures of magic, even dragons. He turned to Grand Maester Bennifer. Grand Maester, do our texts contain any accounts of dragons reacting strangely to the wall? Any lore that might shed light on this unusual behavior? Grand Maester Bennifer, his aged eyes peering over his spectacles, stroked his chin. Your Grace, the accounts are fragmented and often steeped in myth. King Jaehaerys sighed softly. This is troubling. A dragon's instincts are powerful. If Silverwing sensed a danger or a barrier he could not, or would not, cross, we must take heed. He looked back at Alyssane. Did you sense any distress from him, my dear? Any fear or agitation beyond the reluctance to obey? No, Your Grace, Alyssane replied, her brow still slightly furrowed in thought. That is what makes Silverwing's behavior even more perplexing. There was no sense of fear or distress emanating from him, merely a firm, almost stubborn resistance. It was as if an invisible boundary prevented him from proceeding. He seemed unwilling, rather than unable or afraid. She paused, trying to articulate the subtle nuances of her bond with her dragon. It was not the frantic resistance of an animal in fear, but a deliberate act of disobedience, something I have never experienced with him before. He remained calm, even as I urged him onward. It was a clear and conscious refusal to fly beyond the wall. Alyssane looked at the king, her violet eyes reflecting her bewilderment. It was as if he encountered an invisible wall of his own, a barrier that my commands could not penetrate. He obeyed my commands to fly and to descend, but the command to go north, beyond the wall, met with a steadfast and unwavering refusal. Prince Balon, ever curious, leaned forward. Your Grace mentioned this train of the north. It sounds a curious contraption. Could you elaborate on its workings and your impressions? Alyssane briefly described the train, its carriages moving swiftly along metal tracks powered by steam. She highlighted the speed and efficiency of this mode of transport, contrasting it with traditional horse-drawn travel. She noted the ingenuity of the northern engineers and the railway's importance in connecting the vast territories of the north, expressing her admiration for this technological advancement. Grand Maester Bennifer cleared his throat, his aged voice carrying a note of scholarly authority. The Queen speaks highly of this College of Winterhold, and its dedication to learning and innovation, particularly its printing press. While it is commendable that the North has embraced such advancements, it raises a question. Should such valuable knowledge and technology be confined solely to one region? Would not the entire realm benefit if such learning were more widely disseminated? Grand Maester, Alyssane replied, her tone measured and even. While the College of Winterhold is indeed a northern institution, its doors are not closed to those from other regions who seek knowledge. I was informed that anyone with the aptitude and the desire to learn is welcome to study within its halls, regardless of their origin. She continued, the North has invested significantly in establishing and maintaining the college. It is a source of great pride for them, and they see it as their contribution to the realm's intellectual growth. However, they do not hoard its knowledge. Any individual from the south, or any other region, is free to travel to Winterhold and pursue their studies there, provided they meet the college's requirements. Alyssane added, perhaps the Grand Maester could facilitate communication with the college, informing scholars and interested parties in the south of the opportunities available in Winterhold. Encouraging such exchange could indeed lead to a wider dissemination of knowledge and foster greater understanding between the North and the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. He continued, his gaze sweeping across the small council. The printing press, in particular, could revolutionize the spread of literacy and understanding throughout the Seven Kingdoms. Imagine the impact of readily available texts on law, history, medicine, and the arts. To restrict such progress to the North alone seems short-sighted. Perhaps the Crown should explore ways to encourage the sharing of this knowledge and these innovations with the rest of the realm, for the betterment of all. Septon Barth, his kind eyes reflecting a gentle concern, spoke next. While it is heartening to hear that the college welcomes scholars from all regions, Your Grace, the matter of this train seems different. Such an invention, capable of traversing vast distances with such speed, holds immense practical value for trade, communication, and even defense throughout the entire realm. Should not the North have shared this remarkable innovation more openly, allowing the rest of the Seven Kingdoms to benefit from its potential? He continued, his tone persuasive. Imagine the implications for the King's Road, for transporting goods between regions, for the swift movement of royal messengers. To keep such a powerful tool confined to the North seems a disservice to the unity and progress of the realm. Perhaps the Crown should encourage the North to share the secrets of its construction, so that this wonder might be replicated and benefit all of the Seven Kingdoms. With all due respect, Septon Barth, Alyssane replied, her tone firm but respectful, I did raise this very point during my discussions in Winterfell. Lord Theon Stark's position was quite clear. He stated that the development of the railway was a significant undertaking, requiring considerable investment of resources, ingenuity, and time by the North. She continued, his stance was that if the other regions of the realm wish to benefit from this technology, they are welcome to commission the North for its construction. The knowledge and the expertise required to build and operate such a system were hard-earned by the North, and they do not intend to distribute them freely. They see it as a valuable asset, one that they are willing to share, but not without due consideration for the effort and investment it entailed. After a moment of contemplation, King Jaehaerys nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. Lord Theon's position is understandable, he conceded, acknowledging the North's investment. However, the potential benefits of such a railway for the entire realm are undeniable. He then addressed the small council. We shall open a correspondence with Lord Theon Stark on this matter. We will inquire about the costs involved in constructing railway lines in other regions, the expertise and resources the North could provide, and the terms under which such an undertaking could be commissioned. It is crucial that we explore the feasibility of expanding this technology for the greater good of the Seven Kingdoms. The king turned back to Alyssane. My dear, your first-hand account of the railway's efficiency will be invaluable in these discussions. We shall need your insights as we navigate these negotiations with the North. This could be a transformative development for our realm, and we must proceed thoughtfully and strategically. 8 comments 0 vote. King's Landing 6. 77 AC. King's Landing. Third person POV. Queen Alyssane then shifted the focus of the discussion to another pressing matter she had encountered in the North. Your Grace, she began, addressing the king, Lord Theon Stark also raised a significant concern regarding the taxes levied upon the northern territories. He presented a formal petition from the northern lords, requesting a decrease in the current tax burden. Septon Barth immediately interjected, his brow furrowed. With all due respect, Your Grace, those taxes were deemed necessary for the essential functions of the crown. Funds were required for the ongoing construction of vital infrastructure such as roads to improve trade and travel, the expansion and maintenance of the royal fleet to protect our coasts, the upkeep of the Dragon Pit, and, of course, the persistent, albeit less frequent now, skirmishes with Dorne. Alyssane acknowledged his points but stood firm. While I understand the need for royal revenue, Septon Barth, the northern lords emphasized that the taxes have increased fivefold over the past 4 decades. Such a cumulative increase places a tremendous strain on the north, a region that already faces significant economic challenges due to its climate and vast distances. With the realm currently enjoying a period of relative peace, and the skirmishes with Dorne having significantly lessened, it seems prudent to re-evaluate whether such an exorbitant tax burden remains justified. Grand Maester Bennifer, his voice adding weight to Septon Barth's argument, spoke up. The needs of the crown are constant, Your Grace. While overt conflict with Dorne may have subsided, maintaining readiness and ensuring the stability of the realm requires consistent expenditure. The infrastructure projects, once completed, will benefit all regions, including the north, and require sustained funding. Septon Barth nodded in agreement. Indeed, Your Grace. These were not frivolous increases but carefully considered measures to ensure the strength and security of the Seven Kingdoms. To decrease them now could jeopardize essential projects and leave the crown vulnerable to unforeseen circumstances. As this significant tax increase, this fivefold rise over the past 4 decades, something that has been applied uniformly across all the Seven Kingdoms? Alyssane inquired, her gaze sharp as she looked from Septon Barth to the other members of the small council. Are the other regions bearing a similar burden, or is the North being asked to contribute at a disproportionately higher rate? Septon Barth shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding Alyssane's direct gaze. He cleared his throat and adjusted the folds of his robes. The matter of taxation across the Seven Kingdoms is complex, Your Grace, he began, his tone evasive. Each region has its own unique economic circumstances and contributes to the royal coffers in a manner deemed appropriate by the crown's advisors over the years. He then steered the conversation in a different direction. However, it must also be acknowledged that there was a growing sentiment that the North, with its vast territories and relative isolation, was becoming somewhat too independent in its affairs. Measures, including adjustments to taxation, were deemed necessary to reinforce the bonds between the North and the Iron Throne, to ensure their continued integration within the realm and their due contribution to its overall stability and prosperity. Alysanne turned to King Jaehaerys, her expression earnest. "Your Grace," she said, her voice carrying a note of concern, "I understand the desire to ensure the North remains an integral part of the realm. However, there is a vast difference between fostering unity and crippling its people with an excessive tax burden. Five-fold increase in 4 decades is not a gentle nudge towards integration, it risks breeding resentment and undermining the very loyalty we seek to preserve." She continued, her gaze pleading with the king. "The North faces its own unique hardships. Winter is a constant threat, and their yields are not as consistently bountiful as those in the South. To place such a significant financial strain upon them, especially during a time of relative peace, seems not only unjust but also strategically unwise. A prosperous North is a strong North, better equipped to contribute to the realm in the long run. We risk killing the goose that lays the golden eggs, Your Grace." King Jaehaerys listened intently to Alysanne's impassioned plea, his gaze shifting between his queen and Septon Barth. He stroked his beard thoughtfully for a long moment, the weight of her words seeming to resonate with his own sense of fairness. Finally, he turned to Lord Lyman Beesbury, the Master of Coins. "Lord Beesbury," the king commanded, his voice firm and carrying the weight of royal authority, "review the current tax levies upon the northern territories. I want you to ensure that there is a reduction of 20% in their overall tax burden, effective immediately. We must ensure that the North remains a prosperous and loyal region of the realm, and the current level of taxation appears to be causing undue hardship." "Your Grace," Alysanne continued, her voice now imbued with respect, "my visit to the Wall also brought to light the arduous and vital work of the Night's Watch. These men, often forgotten in the comforts of the South, stand as our first and only line of defense against the dangers that dwell beyond the Wall, the remnants of the free folk, yes, but also more sinister things, savage tribes and even cannibals, as Lord Commander Snow informed us." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the small council. "Their dedication is unwavering, their conditions harsh, and their numbers dwindling. They perform a service of immeasurable value to the entire kingdom, protecting us all from threats most in the South can scarcely imagine. I believe it is incumbent upon the Crown to acknowledge their commendable service and to consider what more we can do to support them." Septon Barth stroked his beard thoughtfully, his gaze distant as he considered the Queen's words. "Your Grace raises a valid point," he said finally. "These men dedicate their lives to a thankless vigil. Perhaps we could consider granting the Night's Watch a more sustainable means of support. What if the Crown were to allocate a tract of land south of the Wall, land suitable for cultivation? In addition to Brandon's gift, this would allow them to grow more of their own food and lessen their reliance on the generosity, or lack thereof, of other lords for their sustenance." Grand Maester Benefer nodded in agreement. "A sensible proposal, Lord Hand. Providing them with a degree of self-sufficiency would undoubtedly improve their morale and their ability to focus on their vital duties." Lord Lyman Beesbury, however, demurred, his fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on the table. "With respect, my lords, I am not certain this is the most prudent course. The brothers of the Night's Watch are sworn to celibacy and a life of service. Their focus is on guarding the Wall, not tilling fields. Providing them with more land might create more administrative burdens and distract them from their primary duty. They have always relied on the support of the realm, it is their due." King Jaehaerys listened intently to the differing opinions, his gaze moving from Septon Barth to Lord Beesbury. He stroked his chin for a long moment before speaking. "I believe Lord Hand raises an interesting point, Lord Beesbury," the king said, his voice thoughtful. "While I understand your perspective that their sole duty is to guard the Wall, they must also not rely on Lord's favor. They should not beg for supplies. Lord Hand," King Jaehaerys then instructed Septon Barth, his voice carrying a note of finality, "see to it that a suitable portion of cultivable land south of the Wall is officially granted to the Night's Watch. Ensure that the arrangements are made in a manner that allows them to manage and benefit directly from its yields." The king then turned his gaze towards Queen Alysanne, a silent question in his violet eyes. Alysanne offered a small, affirmative nod, signaling her approval and support for the decision. Turning back to the assembled small council, King Jaehaerys concluded the matter. "Let letters be drafted and sent to Lord Theon Stark without delay. Inform him of the Crown's decision to implement a 20% decrease in the tax burden upon the North. Furthermore, apprise him of our intention to grant a portion of land south of the Wall to the Night's Watch, as a gesture of our appreciation for their unwavering service to the realm." Ensure the letters convey our hope that these measures will foster greater prosperity in the north and provide much-needed support to the valiant brothers of the Night's Watch. Queen Alysanne then broached another matter that had been on her mind since her return. Your Grace, she began, her tone thoughtful, during my visit to the College of Winterhold, I was struck by the quality of their scholarship and their progressive approach to education. It occurred to me that perhaps sending Vagan, Dela, and Sarah to study there for a time might be beneficial for them. Grand Maester Bennifer immediately frowned, his aged face creased with disapproval. With all due respect, Your Grace, such a measure seems unnecessary. Prince Vagan is already tutored by the finest maesters in the realm, and Princesses Dela and Sarah receive instruction befitting their station. Sending them all the way to the north for their education would be disruptive and offer little additional benefit. Septon Barth nodded in agreement with the Grand Maester. Indeed, Your Grace, the traditions of royal education are well established. Our own maesters and septons are more than capable of providing the princes and princesses with the knowledge and guidance they require. The North, while possessing its own unique strengths, follows different customs and beliefs. It would be more appropriate for the royal children to be educated here, in the heart of the Seven Kingdoms, surrounded by the values and traditions of the crown. King Jaehaerys listened intently to the contrasting opinions, his gaze shifting between Alysanne, Grand Maester Bennifer, and Septon Barth. He stroked his beard slowly, absorbing their arguments. The prospect of sending his grandchildren so far north, away from the familiar comforts and customs of the Red Keep, was a significant one. The Grand Maester and Septon Barth presented compelling reasons to adhere to tradition, while Alysanne spoke with genuine enthusiasm about the merits of the College of Winterhold. After a long moment of contemplation, the king sighed softly. This is a matter that requires careful consideration, he said finally, his voice measured. The education of the royal children is of paramount importance, and we must weigh all perspectives before making a decision. I value the wisdom of the Grand Maester and the Council of the Hand, but I also respect Queen Alysanne's judgment and her first-hand experience of the college. I will take some time to reflect on your arguments and will announce my decision at a later time. With that pronouncement from the king, a sense of closure settled over the small council chamber. The weight of several important decisions had been addressed, and the path forward, at least for the immediate future, seemed clearer. The remaining discussions were brief, touching upon minor administrative matters and updates from various corners of the realm. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the room, King Jaehaerys rose from his seat, signaling the end of the council meeting. One by one, the members offered their bows and quiet farewells, each departing to attend to the duties and responsibilities that awaited them, carrying the weight of the day's deliberations. The Queen, too, left the chamber, her mind still occupied with the matters discussed, the welfare of the North, the plight of the Night's Watch, and the potential future of her grandchildren's education all vying for her attention. 15 comments 0 vote. Winterfell -2. 77 AC. Winterfell. Third person POV. In the training yards of Winterfell, the crisp northern air rang with the clang of steel. Arthur Stark, lean and focused, moved with practiced ease, his longsword a blur of motion as he parried and riposted against his brother Haryon. Haryon, a man built like an oak, wielded his greatsword with brute strength, each swing a wide, powerful arc that forced Arthur to give ground. The contrast in their styles was evident. Arthur, agile and precise, Haryon, forceful and relentless. Their practice bout was intense, a dance of steel under the watchful eyes of a few Stark guards, each strike echoing the martial traditions of the North. The clash of steel intensified, each parry and strike carrying the weight of years of training. Haryon pressed his attack, the sheer momentum of his greatsword forcing Arthur onto the defensive. Yet, Arthur's footwork was nimble, and his longsword moved with a deceptive speed. He anticipated Haryon's powerful overhead swing, sidestepping at the last moment and using the momentum of Haryon's strike against him. With a swift, precise movement, Arthur's longsword swept low, catching Haryon's gauntleted hand just as he recovered. The impact jarred Haryon's grip, and the heavy greatsword clattered onto the packed earth of the training yard, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. Arthur's longsword remained poised, its tip a hair's breadth from Haryon's chest, signaling the end of their bout. Arthur lowered his longsword slightly, his breath coming in steady puffs. He looked at his brother, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Yield, brother?" he asked, the question a formality after the decisive disarm. Haryon, his chest heaving from the exertion, looked down at his fallen greatsword. A grudging respect flickered in his eyes as he met Arthur's gaze. "I," he grunted, a hint of amusement in his voice despite the defeat. "I yield, Arthur. You were quick today." The clang of steel now silent, the two brothers made their way to a sturdy wooden bench that lined the edge of the training yard. They sat heavily, the exertion of their sparring still evident in their breathing. The cool northern air provided a welcome respite. For a few moments, they simply sat in comfortable silence, the sounds of Winterfell carrying around them, the distant barking of hounds, the murmur of voices from within the castle walls, the rustling of leaves in the ancient godswood. Finally, Arthur broke the quiet. "You were strong as always, Harrion," he said, turning to his brother. "Your overhead strikes nearly took my head off a few times." Arthur shifted on the bench, his gaze drifting towards the distant walls of Wintertown. "Harrion," he began, a note of curiosity in his voice, "are you planning to ride to Wintertown anytime soon? I recall Master Lucan mentioning that the initial designs for the new train line extension have been finalized, and construction has begun. I'm curious to see the progress and perhaps understand the proposed route." "Aye, Arthur," Harrion replied, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "I was planning to ride to Wintertown within the next day or two. Master Lucan sent word that the initial phase of construction is underway, and I want to see how the work progresses. Father is keen to ensure it's done properly." Arthur nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Father mentioned that the new engines and carriages they're building will be used for the railway line being laid from Barrowtown to Carhold." The guard, a young man named Bran, seemed slightly out of breath. "My lords," he repeated, adding with a touch of urgency, "Lord Stark requests your presence in his solar. He wishes to speak with both of you, my lord." Harrion, ever direct, turned to the guard, a questioning look in his eyes. "Did he say what this is about, Bran?" he asked, his brow slightly furrowed. "Why does father need both of us in his solar?" Bran shook his head. "No, my lord. He simply said he wished to speak with both Lord Arthur and you. He did not mention the reason." The young guard's earnest expression offered no further clues, leaving the brothers to speculate on the purpose of their father's summons as they made their way towards the Lord's solar within the ancient walls of Winterfell. The two brothers exchanged a brief glance, a shared sense of unease settling upon them. They followed Bran as he led them through the familiar corridors of Winterfell, the stone walls echoing with their footsteps. As they approached the heavy oak door of their father's solar, a guard stationed outside nodded respectfully. "My lords," he murmured, before tapping lightly on the door. After a moment, Lord Stark's voice, usually steady and calm, sounded from within. "Enter." The guard pulled the door open, and Arthur and Harrion stepped into the solar. The atmosphere within the room was immediately heavy. Lord Theon Stark sat behind his large wooden desk, his usual stern expression now etched with a deep grimness. Seated near the hearth, their mother, Lady Diana Stark, also wore a troubled look, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The familiar warmth of the fire did little to dispel the palpable tension in the room. Lord Theon gestured towards two chairs placed before his desk. "Arthur, Harrion," he said, his voice low, "sit down. We need to talk." Lord Theon's gaze was serious as he held a sealed scroll in his hand. "There has been a message from King's Landing," he began, his voice somber. "There is some adjustment to the taxes levied upon the North. The king has decreed a 20% reduction." A flicker of relief crossed Harrion's face. "Finally," he murmured, leaning back in his chair. "Some good news from the south, for once." Lady Diana's expression remained troubled. "Don't be so quick to celebrate, Harrion," she cautioned, her voice soft but firm. "Hear the full message before you draw any conclusions." A knot of unease tightened in Arthur's stomach. He exchanged a worried glance with Harrion. "What else is it, father?" he asked, his voice low. "What else did the king's message contain?" Lord Theon's grip tightened on the scroll. "The king also intends to grant the Night's Watch an additional 25 leagues of land south of the wall." Harrion's eyes widened in surprise and disbelief. "What?" he exclaimed, his earlier relief vanishing instantly. He leaned forward, his brow furrowed. 25 leagues. That's a significant amount of land. Why would the king do that? Arthur, his unease solidifying into a grim certainty, simply nodded, his gaze distant as he considered the implications. "The Umbers," he said, his voice low and grave, "and the mountain clans, they will not be silent about this. That land likely borders their own territories. This will be seen as an encroachment." Lady Diana's expression was grave, her gaze sweeping between her sons. "We have been discussing this since the Raven arrived," she confirmed, her voice laced with worry. "Many of the northern lords were already deeply disgruntled by the repeated tax increases over the past decades. Now, to be told that a significant portion of land that likely holds strategic or economic value to them, is to be ceded to the Night's Watch, this is a different matter entirely." She shook her head slowly. "They might have grumbled about taxes, but this touches upon their ancestral holdings, their power, their very identity. They will not view this as a generous gift to the Night's Watch. They will see it as the crown, influenced by the South, demanding they relinquish their own territories. They will not let this one slide without a fight, Theon." Mark my words. Lord Theon sighed heavily, running a weary hand over his face. Aye, he agreed, his voice grim. They will have more than words for what is happening right now. The reduction in taxes will be seen as a pittance, a crumb thrown to appease them while a significant chunk of their land is being given away. This could very well undo any goodwill Elisaine's visit might have fostered. This decision from King's Landing, it is dangerously ill-conceived. A heavy silence descended upon the solar, the crackling of the fire the only sound in the room. The weight of the king's decree hung in the air, the implications for the North stark and unsettling. Finally, Lord Theon broke the silence, his voice low and thoughtful. Someone, he said slowly, his gaze distant as if piecing together a puzzle, someone in King's Landing, or perhaps even closer, is either profoundly ignorant of the North or is deliberately trying to incite the North against the crown. It has to be the Maesters and Septon Barth, Arthur said, his voice firm. They have always looked down upon the North, our traditions, our gods. The establishment of the College of Winterhold, with its emphasis on learning beyond the Citadel's control and its implicit acceptance of our ways, must have rankled them. This land grant, cloaked in piety towards the Night's Watch, feels like a direct attempt to undermine our authority and reassert the dominance of the faith and the Citadel's influence. Harrion nodded in agreement, his jaw tight. Aye, they see the North as backward, clinging to old ways. The college is a challenge to their monopoly on knowledge. This land grab is likely their way of striking back, of reminding us of our place in their eyes. Lady Diana's gaze was sharp. It fits their pattern. Septon Barth's veiled disapproval of our faith during the Queen's visit, the Grand Maester's condescending remarks about Northern learning, they see us as heathens who need to be brought into the light. Weakening the Northern lords through this land grant would serve their agenda perfectly, making us more reliant on the crown and, by extension, their doctrines. Lord Theon's expression was grim. It seems you were right. Their prejudice against the North, against our gods and our growing independence in matters of learning, likely fuels this decision. They see the college as a threat, and this land grant as a means to diminish our power and reassert their control. This is not merely about supporting the Night's Watch, it is about undermining the North. Lord Theon's voice dropped, his tone heavy with grim realization. And with this, he said slowly, his gaze dark, they are likely hoping for a rebellion. They believe that by provoking the Northern lords with this blatant land grab, they can incite us to rise against the Iron Throne. Once that happens, in their eyes, we will be branded as traitors. They envision a scenario where the great houses of the North, like the extinct Gardeners and Hoars of old, are crushed. They would then install new lords, ones more amenable to their influence, more willing to bend to the will of the South and, yes, slowly but surely, to embrace their faith. He clenched his fist on the table. They see this as an opportunity to break the strength and the spirit of the North once and for all. They underestimate our resilience, our unity, and our long memory. But their arrogance is dangerous. We must not give them the satisfaction of seeing the North descend into chaos. We must be shrewd, deliberate, and united in our response. Lord Theon leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant, a hint of grim satisfaction in his eyes. I knew, he said, his voice low and steady, I always knew that a day like this would come. The South has always viewed the North with suspicion, with a desire to control us. That is why, from a young age, I began to subtly shift things here in the North, little by little. From introducing new agricultural techniques to strengthen our yields and lessen our reliance on southern grain, to fostering our own trade routes, building our own ships, and investing in the railways, all of it was done with this eventuality in mind. He gestured around the solar, encompassing the entirety of the North in his mind. I knew that eventually, the venom of southern politics, their intrigues and their desire for dominance, would inevitably spread its tendrils north. I sought to make the North as self-sufficient and resilient as possible, to build our own strength so that when this day arrived, we would not be easily broken. We have made progress, but this land grant, this is a significant challenge, one that will test the foundations we have laid. And that is why, Lord Theon continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a hint of ancient power underlying his words, I chose to keep certain truths hidden from the South. The existence of the ice dragons, slumbering in the long lake. The continued presence of the children of the forest in the deepest parts of our woods. The strength of the giants. These are secrets, powerful secrets, that offer the North a strength the South cannot comprehend. They are secrets we hold close to our chest, to be played only when absolutely necessary. He looked at his sons, his gaze intense. The South believes they hold all the power, that they can dictate terms and provoke us with impunity. They do not know the true depth of the North's resilience, the allies we have, the ancient forces that still stir within our lands. Let them underestimate us. Let them believe they can extinguish the wolf with a single blow. They will learn, perhaps too late, that the North holds secrets that can shatter their southern arrogance. Arthur looked at his father, his expression a mixture of concern and determination. What now, father? He asked, the weight of the unfolding situation heavy in the air. How do we respond to this? Lord Theon's jaw was set, his eyes hard. We will not react rashly, he declared. Our first move will be to send a formal request to King's Landing. We will demand that the decree granting 25 leagues of northern land to the Night's Watch be rescinded immediately. We will make it unequivocally clear that our bannermen will not tolerate the removal of land from their control. We will emphasize the deep unrest and potential for conflict this ill-conceived decision has already sown. Harrion's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his non-existent sword. And if they refuse, father? If King's Landing ignores our request and insists on this land grant? Lord Theon's gaze hardened, his voice leaving no room for doubt. Then, he stated firmly, we will convene a great council here in Winterfell. We will summon all the lords of the north, from the stony shore to the last hearth. We will lay out the situation before them, explain the crown's actions and their implications, and together, the north will decide how we shall respond. We will stand united. The Stark family continued to discuss the gravity of the news from King's Landing, exploring potential strategies and the likely reactions of the northern lords. They considered the wording of their letter to the Iron Throne, ensuring it conveyed their displeasure and the potential consequences without being overtly hostile. The need for unity amongst the northern houses was paramount, and they spoke of the importance of presenting a strong, unified front. After a time, the weight of the unfolding crisis settled upon them, and the discussion began to wind down. Lord Theon, with a heavy sigh, finally rose from his desk. There is much to be done, he said, his gaze sweeping over his sons and his wife. We must begin preparing our response and summoning the lords. Let us each attend to our own tidings, and reconvene later to coordinate our efforts. With nods of understanding, Arthur and Harrion followed their mother from the Solar, each now burdened with the responsibility of the looming conflict and the need to protect the North from the perceived encroachment of the South. 26 comments 0 vote. King Landing 7. 77 AC. King's Landing. Third person POV. King Jaehaerys Targaryen sat at the head of the council table, his queen Alysanne at his right hand. The small council chamber in the Red Keep was bathed in morning light filtering through the tall windows, casting a golden glow across the polished surface of the table. To the king's left sat his eldest son and heir, Prince Aemon Targaryen, the Master of Laws. His silver gold hair was pulled back neatly, his violet eyes attentive as he reviewed the documents before him. Hand of the King Septon Barth sat nearby, his plain robes a stark contrast to the finery of the others present. The crown's finances continue to improve, Your Grace, Lyman Beesbury, the Master of Coin, was saying. The reforms to customs collections at the ports have increased revenue by nearly a fifth. Mafried Redwyn, Master of Ships, nodded in agreement. And with the new vessels commissioned for the Royal Fleet, our presence in the Narrow Sea has never been stronger. Grand Maester Bennifer clearing his throat. The elderly maester held up a small scroll, the broken seal clearly visible. Pardon the interruption, Your Grace, my lords, Bennifer said, his chains clinking softly as he shifted in his seat. A raven has just arrived from the north. The seal bears the direwolf sigil of House Stark. The kings exchanged a knowing glance with Septon Barth. No doubt regarding our new decree, he said, his voice measured and calm despite the tension that had settled over the chamber. It was only a matter of time before Lord Stark made his thoughts known on the matter. Grand Maester Bennifer presented the scroll to King Jaehaerys with a bow. The council fell silent as the king broke the direwolf seal and read the message. With each line, his expression darkened until his face settled into a grim mask. Without comment, he passed the parchment to Queen Alysanne. Their fingers touched briefly as she took the scroll, and the council members watched tensely, noting the subtle changes in the royal couple's demeanor. Septon Barth leaned forward, Prince Aemon straightened in his seat, and Prince Baelin's hand drifted to his sword hilt as the queen's serene expression gave way to one matching her husband's gravity. Lord Stark says the new decree granting lands south of the Wall to the Night's Watch is not in the North's interest, Queen Alysanne stated, handing the scroll back to the king. Those fields are vital for grain production. He warns the northern lords will be displeased and urges us to reconsider our decision. Her voice remained measured, but the concern in her eyes was unmistakable as she looked to her husband for his response. The North remains under the Iron Throne's rule, Septon Barth said firmly, his voice cutting through the momentary silence. His weathered hands rested flat against the table as he leaned forward slightly. I reviewed this letter before our meeting, Your Grace. While Lord Stark's concerns are noted, the fact remains that they should do as their king commands. His eyes, sharp despite his years, moved from the king to the other council members. We cannot allow individual kingdoms to dictate royal policy, particularly regarding matters as essential as supporting the Night's Watch. I concur with the Hand, Grand Maester Benefer said, the heavy chains around his neck clinking softly as he nodded. His gnarled fingers stroked his white beard thoughtfully. The precedent would be dangerous. If we yield to the North on this matter, what message does it send to Dorne or the Iron Islands when they disagree with royal decrees? The old maester's voice carried the weight of historical knowledge. The Night's Watch serves the realm, and all must contribute to its maintenance, Your Grace. The Starks have traditionally understood this better than most. Prince Aemon Targaryen cleared his throat, drawing attention to the king's left. The heir's expression was thoughtful, his violet eyes contemplative as he considered both sides of the argument. Perhaps we might find middle ground in this matter, he suggested, his voice measured and diplomatic. Lord Stark raises valid concerns about the North's grain production, which we should not dismiss lightly. As Master of Laws, I believe we should invite Lord Stark to King's Landing to discuss this matter in person. He gestured toward the letter. A face-to-face negotiation would allow us to better understand the specific concerns of the Northern Lords while explaining our reasoning for supporting the Night's Watch. Only then should we make our final determination. I stand with my brother on this, Prince Baelon said, his voice carrying the confident tone of a seasoned warrior. He leaned forward, his broader shoulders and more martial bearing a contrast to Aemon's scholarly demeanor despite their shared Targaryen features. The Starks are proud but loyal. They've held the North for thousands of years and understand its needs better than we do from King's Landing. The prince's gaze moved respectfully to his father, awaiting the king's response to his proposal. Queen Alysanne placed her hand on the table. My husband, she said gently, shouldn't we reconsider this carefully? The North remembers. We must balance the Watch's needs with the North's well-being. Are there no alternative lands for the Watch? And Lord Hand, she added, turning respectfully to Septon Barth, while our authority is absolute, is inflexibility always wise? The Starks have served us faithfully for ages. Shouldn't their counsel on northern matters hold some weight? Grand Maester Benefer's voice rose, his tone laced with concern. But Your Grace, he cautioned, his gaze sweeping across the council, to invite Lord Stark to negotiate on a royal decree. Would that not set a dangerous precedent? Would it not suggest that the Iron Throne's pronouncements are subject to the whims and desires of individual lords? If we reverse this decision simply to appease the Starks, what message does that send to the rest of the realm? Should we not, instead, make an example? Reaffirm that the Iron Throne's word is final, and that all lords, no matter how ancient or powerful, must abide by it. Septon Barth nodded in agreement with the Grand Maester, his expression resolute. Indeed, Your Grace, he affirmed. To negotiate now would be seen as weakness. Let the decree stand. We have made our decision in what we believe to be the best interest of the realm, particularly the Night's Watch. If Lord Stark continues to object, then perhaps we can inquire what concessions he seeks to appease the Northern Lords. We can offer something in return for their acceptance, but we should not appear to be backing down from a royal edict. Septon Barth nodded in agreement with the Grand Maester, his expression resolute. Indeed, Your Grace, he affirmed. To negotiate now would be seen as weakness. Let the decree stand. We have made our decision in what we believe to be the best interest of the realm, particularly the Night's Watch. If Lord Stark continues to object, then perhaps we can inquire what concessions he seeks to appease the Northern Lords. We can offer something in return for their acceptance, but we should not appear to be backing down from a royal edict. With the king's pronouncements made, a sense of finality settled over the small council chamber. One by one, the Hand, the Grand Maester, the Master of Coin, and the Master of Ships offered their bows and departed, each carrying the weight of the day's decisions. Soon, only the Targaryen family remained. King Jaehaerys, Queen Alysanne, Prince Aemon, and Prince Baelon. The air in the room, once thick with the tension of debate, now held a quieter, more personal weight as they considered the implications of the king's unyielding stance and the potential repercussions in the north. Queen Alysanne rose from her chair, her gaze meeting her husband's across the polished table. Her usual serene expression was clouded with concern. My love, she said softly, her voice carrying a note of urgency, I fear the lords of the north will not take this decree well. They already harbor resentment towards the crown due to what they perceive as unjust tax burdens. This land grant will be seen not as a benevolent act towards the Night's Watch, but as a direct encroachment upon their own territories, a further sign of our disregard for their concerns. King Jaehaerys sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. I know, Alysanne, he conceded, his gaze troubled. You speak truly. But a royal decree, once issued, cannot be so easily rescinded. It would undermine the very authority of the Iron Throne. If we were to backtrack now, it would signal weakness, and every lord in the Seven Kingdoms would believe they could challenge our pronouncements with impunity. We must maintain the strength of our word, even when the consequences are difficult. Prince Aemon, ever the pragmatist, leaned forward, his brow furrowed in thought. But father, he interjected, his voice measured, what if our offer of consideration is not enough? What if the lords of the north remain steadfast in their opposition to the decree? What course do we take then if they still do not agree? King Jaehaerys, violet eyes hardened, a flicker of the dragon fire that ran through his veins igniting within them. His voice, though still calm, now carried an unmistakable edge of steel. Then, he declared, his gaze unwavering, if they persist in their defiance, if they choose to disregard the king's word, we will answer them with fire and blood. The north is part of the seven kingdoms, and they will obey the crown's decrees. We will not tolerate open rebellion. Prince Balon, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of his sword, nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. Indeed, father, he agreed, his gaze steady. And it is not just the north we must consider. If we resort to fire and blood against the Stark, the other Lord Paramounts will take notice. They will see that even a house as ancient and powerful as the Starks is not immune to the Iron Throne's wrath. But, he paused, a hint of concern in his voice, they might also begin to fear for their own positions in the future. They might wonder if their own ancestral lands and rights could one day be similarly challenged by royal decree. It could sow seeds of fear and resentment among the most powerful families in the realm. King Jaehaerys, jaw tightened, his gaze hardening. They should fear us, Balon, he stated firmly, his voice resonating with royal authority. Respect is earned, yes, but fear ensures obedience. We cannot allow any of the great lords to believe they can simply disregard the crown's decrees. To back down now, to show leniency in the face of defiance, would make us appear weak. It would embolden others to test our authority, to push the boundaries of their power. The Iron Throne must project strength, unwavering resolve. The stability of the entire realm depends on it. King Jaehaerys, stern demeanor softened slightly as he turned his attention to his sons. Balon, Aemon, he asked, a hint of grandfatherly warmth entering his voice, how fares baby Viserys? And little Rhaenys? She must be quite the handful at 3 years old now. Balon offered a small smile. Viserys is thriving, father. He grows stronger each day. Alyssa dotes on him, as you can imagine. He has your silver hair, you know. Aemon chuckled, a fond look in his eyes. And Rhaenys, well, handful, is putting it mildly, father. She has Jocelyn's spirit, that's for certain. She's into everything, asking endless questions. She's bright and curious, a joy to be around, even when she's demanding all your attention. King Jaehaerys, eyes softened further at the mention of his grandchildren. Good, he murmured, a hint of a smile gracing his lips. It warms my heart to hear they are well. Tell Alyssa and Jocelyn that I intend to visit Dragonstone in the coming days. I long to see them all, to hold young Viserys again and witness Rhaenys' boundless energy for myself. It has been too long. Queen Alysanne smiled warmly. Then I shall join you, my love, she said, her gaze meeting his. 10 days from now, we shall both travel to Dragonstone. I, too, am eager to see our grandchildren. It will be a welcome respite from the matters of the court. King Jaehaerys nodded, taking his queen's hand across the table. Yes, he affirmed, his voice softening further. We will. A journey to Dragonstone, to be surrounded by family, it is precisely what we both need. The weight of the north and the small council seemed to lift slightly from his shoulders at the prospect of seeing his grandchildren. The conversation then drifted away from the weighty matters of state and turned towards the lighter, more personal realm of family. They spoke of Alyssa's well-being after childbirth and the latest antics of their growing grandchildren. Balon recounted Rhaenys' surprisingly insightful questions and her burgeoning curiosity about dragons. Queen Alysanne spoke of the joy of watching the next generation of Targaryens flourish, and King Jaehaerys listened with a fond smile, the worries of the kingdom momentarily receding as he focused on the bonds of blood and affection that held his family together. They reminisced about their own children's younger years, sharing fond memories and quiet laughter, the warmth of familial love filling the council chamber. 12 comments 0 vote. Title at the end. 77 AC. Winterfell. In Lord Theon Stark's solar we can see grim faces of the Stark family. Lord Theon sat behind his desk, the unwelcome letter from King's Landing lying before him like a harbinger of ill fortune. His wife, Lady Diana, stood beside him, her expression a mirror of his own. Their sons, Arthur and Haryon, stood before them, their youthful faces etched with concern. The message is clear, Lord Theon began, his voice low and heavy. The king will not rescind the decree. The land south of the wall is to be granted to the Night's Watch, regardless of the consequences. A heavy silence settled over the room. Haryon clenched his fists, his frustration barely contained. So, the South believes a few empty words will appease our lords. A token gesture of help, after they've already taken what they want. Arter, ever more measured, spoke with a quiet intensity. It's an insult, father. They offer us crumbs while stealing the loaf. The lords will see this for what it is. A blatant disregard for their rights and their power. Lady Diana stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over her sons. They underestimate the North. They believe we will meekly accept this affront, that a few trinkets or titles will soothe our anger. They do not understand the pride and the resilience of our people. Lord Theon sighed, running a weary hand over his face. They believe they can dictate terms from afar, that the Iron Throne's word is law, regardless of the consequences to the North. They fail to grasp that the North is not some conquered territory. We had bent the knee for our people not because we were afraid. Harion's voice rose, his anger barely leashed. They speak of helping us, appease, our lords. As if we are unruly children who can be pacified with sweet words and empty promises. They treat us with contempt. Arter placed a calming hand on his brother's shoulder. We must not let anger cloud our judgment, Harion. We need to be strategic, to channel this fury into a unified response. Lady Diana nodded in agreement. Arter is right. We must tread carefully. A rash move could play into the South's hands, giving them the excuse they need to intervene directly in the North. Lord Theon rose from his desk, pacing the length of the solar. We must summon the lords. A great council. We need to gauge their reaction, to understand the depth of their anger, and to forge a united front. And what of our response to King's Landing? Harion asked, his voice sharp. Do we simply thank them for their generosity, and accept this injustice? Lord Theon stopped pacing, his gaze hardening. We will send a message. After speaking to all the lords of North. Arter added, we must also remind them of the North's strength, of our long memory, and of our unwavering loyalty to the Seven Kingdoms, but not at the cost of our honor. Lady Diana's voice was firm. We must speak with one voice. The North must stand united against this encroachment. We cannot allow the South to divide us. Theon nodded. Agreed. Ravens will be sent to every holdfast in the North. We will gather at Winterfell and decide our course of action. The future of the North hangs in the balance. Harion's anger began to give way to a grim determination. Then let us prepare, father. Let the South know that the North remembers, and that the wolf still has teeth. Arter stood tall, his gaze resolute. We will defend our lands, our people, and our traditions. The North will not be broken. Theon looked at his sons, pride and concern mingled in his eyes. The burden of leadership falls upon you now, as it will one day fall entirely. You must be strong, wise, and unwavering. Diana placed a hand on Theon's arm. We will face this together, as we always have. The Starks have weathered many storms, and we will weather this one too. Theon looked at his family, a flicker of hope amidst the grim determination. The North is strong, and its people are resilient. We will not yield. We will not be broken. The Stark family stood united, their faces set, their hearts heavy with the weight of responsibility, but their spirits unbroken. The North would not be easily swayed. After 7 days, the Great Hall of Winterfell, usually a place of warmth and boisterous camaraderie, was heavy with a tense silence. Night had fallen, and the hall was filled with the lords of the North and their heirs, gathered at Lord Theon Stark's summons. But the atmosphere was far from the usual cheerful gatherings. The long tables, though laden with food and drink, were largely untouched. The usual boisterous laughter and friendly banter were replaced by hushed whispers and grim pronouncements. 7 days had passed since the ravens had flown, carrying the news of the king's decree and Lord Stark's urgent call. Now, the lords had arrived, their faces reflecting the long journey and the weight of the news they carried in their hearts. They had learned, before even entering the council chamber, the purpose of this gathering, the king's unwavering decision regarding the land grant to the Night's Watch. Each lord carried the burden of this decree, the implications for their own lands, their own people, etched into their features. Some faces were grim, hardened by years of facing the harsh realities of the North. Others were flushed with anger, their voices low and dangerous as they spoke of broken promises and encroaching southern influence. The air crackled with a barely suppressed fury, a collective sense of betrayal that threatened to spill over into open defiance. Lord Theon Stark, his face as cold and unyielding as the northern winter, rose from the high seat at the head of the great hall. His gaze swept across the assembled lords, each face a study in grim determination. The hall, usually echoing with warmth and camaraderie, was now heavy with a silence broken only by the crackling of the hearth fires. My lords, Theon began, his voice resonating with a quiet authority that commanded attention, I thank you for answering my summons with such haste. I know the journey was arduous, and the news that brought you here weighs heavily on us all. We all know why we are gathered, but for those who are not fully aware of the details, let me speak plainly. He paused, his gaze lingering on each lord in turn, ensuring his words carried the full weight of their import. The king, in his wisdom, or perhaps in his ignorance, has decreed that 25 leagues of land south of the wall are to be granted to the Night's Watch. A murmur of discontent rippled through the hall, a low growl of anger that Theon allowed to hang in the air for a moment before continuing. I sent a message to King's Landing, a message expressing the grave concerns of the North. I explained that this land is vital for our grain production, essential for feeding our people, and that the lords of the North would not take kindly to having it stripped away. Theon's voice hardened, the coldness in his eyes reflecting the chill that had settled over the North. The Iron Throne's reply was unsatisfactory. They claim the decree has been passed, that it cannot be rescinded. They offer us, instead, favors, in return, as if trinkets and titles can compensate for the loss of our land and the insult to our honor. He raised a hand, silencing the growing unrest. They believe they can appease us with empty promises, that we will meekly accept their dictates from afar. They underestimate the North, its pride, its resilience, and its unity. They do not understand that we are not children to be bought and sold, but a people with a long memory and an unyielding spirit. Theon's gaze swept across the assembled lords once more, his voice ringing with a quiet fury. We are here to decide how the North will respond. We will not be dictated to. We will not be diminished. We will not be broken. As Lord Theon's final words echoed through the great hall, a cacophony of voices erupted. The carefully maintained silence shattered, replaced by a torrent of angry pronouncements and outraged exclamations. The lords of the North, their faces flushed with indignation, rose from their seats, their voices overlapping in a furious chorus of dissent. Injustice. Lord Manderley boomed, his usually jovial face now red with anger. This is an outrage. To steal our land, the very sustenance of our people, and offer us mere trinkets in return. The South truly believes us fools. Lord Wool, his massive frame shaking with barely contained fury, roared, cruel. It is nothing short of cruel. That land has fed my people for generations. Does the soft king in his sunny South understand the hardship this will bring? Lord Mormont, bigger in stature than many of the lords present, his voice cut through the din with steely resolve. The Iron Throne shows its true colors. They care nothing for the North, nothing for our needs. We are but a source of taxes to them, and now, land to be freely given away. Lord Karstark, his face a mask of icy fury, spoke with a low, dangerous growl. Broken promises. We have always been loyal to the Iron Throne, have shed our blood in their wars. And this is our reward. To be treated like conquered dogs. The younger lords, heirs to ancient houses, echoed the sentiments of their elders. They think we will stand idly by while they carve up our lands. Young Lord Serwyn exclaimed, his youthful idealism clashing with the bitter reality of the king's decree. Lord Flint, his weathered face etched with years of hardship, spat on the stone floor. Favors. What favors can they offer that will replace the grain that feeds our children through the long winters? Their gold is useless when our bellies are empty. The air in the great hall grew thick with anger, the collective fury of the North palpable. Lords pounded their fists on the tables, their voices rising in a unified cry of protest against the injustice they perceived. The very stones of Winterfell seemed to absorb their outrage, the ancient hall resonating with their defiance. We will not yield, Lord Glover declared, his voice ringing with conviction. The North will not be treated as a plaything of the South. Our land is our lifeblood. Theon Stark watched the outpouring of anger, his own face still and cold, but a flicker of grim satisfaction in his eyes. The North was united in its outrage. Now came the time to channel that fury into a decisive course of action. A hush fell over the great hall as Ned Umber, his massive frame casting a long shadow in the flickering torchlight, suddenly stood. His voice, when it boomed across the hall, cut through the lingering echoes of outrage like the crack of ice on a frozen lake. All eyes turned to him, the assembled lords and their heirs watching with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. My lords, Ned Umber began, his gaze sweeping across the room, his voice raw with northern pride and simmering resentment. My lords, here's what I say to the king's decree. He paused, then with a guttural sound of utter contempt, spat onto the stone floor. Jaehaerys Targaryen is nothing to me, nor the Iron Throne. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Ned Umber's words were a stark declaration, a line drawn in the snow. He continued, his voice rising in defiance. Why should they rule over me and mine from some flowery seat in the south? What do they know of the wall or the wolfswood? Have they ever felt the bite of a true winter? Even their gods are wrong. Why shouldn't we rule ourselves again? His gaze then fixed upon the high table, upon Lord Theon Stark, the man who had summoned them, the man who carried the weight of their ancient lineage. There sits the only king the first mean to bend my knee to, the king in the north. With a thunderous sound that echoed the defiance in his words, Ned Umber dropped to one knee, his massive frame bowing in fealty. The king in the north. He roared, his voice filled with a primal loyalty that resonated deep within the hearts of every northern lord present. A stunned silence hung in the air for a heartbeat, then, as if a dam had broken, the great hall erupted. Lords rose from their seats, their faces alight with a fierce, long-dormant pride. The king in the north. 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 They roared, their voices joining Ned Umber's in a thunderous chorus that shook the very foundations of Winterfell. One by one, ancient lords and young heirs alike bent the knee, their fealty pledged to the Lord of Winterfell, the descendant of the first men, the rightful king in the north. The cries of, "The king in the north," echoed through the hall, a wave of fervent loyalty washing over the assembled lords. The air crackled with a newfound energy, the grimness and anger of moments before now transmuted into a fierce, unified purpose. The North had found its voice. Finally, after the fervent declarations had subsided somewhat, Lord Theon Stark, his face now etched with a solemn resolve, rose slowly from his high seat. He looked out over the assembled lords, his gaze meeting theirs, a silent acknowledgement of the momentous decision that had just been made. He offered a single, curt nod. "Rise, my lords," Theon commanded, his voice resonating with a newfound authority, the weight of kingship settling upon his shoulders. He paused, his gaze unwavering, his voice clear and strong. War it is. 17,0 vote. Preparations. 77 AC. Winterfell. Third person POV. As Lord Theon's pronouncement of war it is hung in the air, a stirring rippled through the assembled lords. Then all the lords raised their blades high above their heads. A unified roar erupted, shaking the very stones of Winterfell, a primal cry of defiance and unwavering loyalty. For the North, they bellowed, their voices echoing off the ancient walls, a testament to their fierce independence and their willingness to fight for their ancestral lands and their chosen king. The sound was deafening, a promise of war that would soon spread across the vast territories of the North, carried on the winds and whispered in the shadows. The die had been cast. The North had chosen its path. As the thunderous cries of, "For the North," began to subside, leaving a ringing in the ears and a fervent fire in the hearts of the assembled lords, Theon Stark turned his attention to the immediate necessities of the coming conflict. His gaze, now sharp and focused, settled upon the Lord of White Harbor. "Lord Manderley," Theon commanded, his voice clear and decisive, cutting through the lingering echoes of the war cry, "You are to take command of the Eastern Fleet. Ready every ship, arm every sailor. Ensure our coasts are secure and prepare to move men and supplies as needed. The narrow sea may soon see more than just merchant vessels." He then turned to the formidable Lord of Bear Isle. "Lord Mormont," Theon continued, his respect evident in his tone, "you will oversee the preparations of the Western Fleet. Muster your ships, secure the stony shore, and be ready to patrol our western waters. We must ensure no unwelcome guests arrive unannounced." Next, Theon's gaze fell upon his own brother, his loyal and steadfast kin. "Janos," he instructed, his voice firm, "close the gates on the moat, and I want every wagon, every traveler, every piece of merchandise entering these walls thoroughly checked. We cannot risk spies or sabotage within our very heart." Finally, Theon addressed the assembled lords once more, his voice resonating with the weight of leadership. "My lords," he declared, his gaze sweeping across their determined faces, "the die is cast. Return to your lands, muster your men, gather your supplies. We will meet in 1 moon's time at Moat Cailin. There, we will forge our strategy and prepare to defend the North against any who would seek to subjugate us. Go now, and let the strength of the wolf be known throughout the land." As the northern lords began to stir, a sense of grim purpose settling over them as they prepared to depart and heed his commands, Theon Stark spoke once more, his voice barely a whisper. "Winter is coming," he murmured. It was a quiet vow, a solemn declaration that the North was prepared for whatever darkness lay ahead. As Lord Theon's chilling whisper of, "Winter is coming," settled over the great hall, a hush momentarily fell before erupting into a flurry of hushed, urgent conversations. The lords, their initial outburst of defiance now channeled into grim practicality, settled back onto the long benches, turning to their neighbors and heirs. The air buzzed with the low murmur of strategic discussions. Experienced lords, their faces etched with the wisdom of past conflicts, began to outline potential threats and necessary preparations. Younger, more eager lords listened intently, their hands resting on the hilts of their swords, ready to prove their mettle. Lord Manderley, despite his earlier fury, now spoke with a measured tone to his kin, likely discussing the mobilization of the White Harbor Fleet and the securing of vital trade routes. Nearby, Lord Umber, his brow furrowed in thought, conferred with his bannermen, no doubt strategizing how best to marshal the fierce warriors of the last hearth and secure their southern borders. Lord Mormont, his gaze sharp and unwavering, issued concise instructions to his heir, likely concerning the defenses of Bear Isle and the readiness of their longships. Lord Karstark, his usual icy demeanor even more pronounced, spoke in low, clipped tones to his sons, undoubtedly planning the mustering of their formidable cavalry. Throughout the Great Hall, similar discussions unfolded. Lords debated the number of men each house could raise, the availability of arms and armor, and the logistical challenges of moving armies across the vast distances of the north. The urgency of the situation was palpable, yet beneath the tension, there was a current of grim determination, a shared understanding of the gravity of their decision and the fight that lay ahead. The initial fervor of declaring a king had now given way to the cold, hard realities of preparing for war. The lords of the north, though united in their defiance, understood the immense task before them. The coming conflict would test their strength, their loyalty, and their very survival. The whispers in the Great Hall were the first seeds of the war to come, planted in the ancient stones of Winterfell. By midday, Winterfell's courtyard echoed with the departure of northern lords and their retinues, each heading back to their ancestral lands. Lord Manderley rode east towards White Harbor, Lord Umber north to the Last Hearth, and Lord Mormont's party prepared for Bear Isle. Lord Karstark and the lesser lords followed, their farewells brief but resolute. Theon Stark and his sons watched as the last lords disappeared, a quiet determination settling over Winterfell. The call had been answered. The north prepared for war. The solar of Winterfell, now quiet after the departure of the northern lords, became the Stark family's war room. Lord Theon, Lady Diana, Arthur, and Harrion gathered around a large, crudely drawn map of the north, its edges marked with the strategic points that would soon become battlegrounds. The weight of the coming conflict pressed down on them, the air thick with the unspoken understanding of the immense task that lay ahead. The lords have answered the call, Theon began, his voice low and steady, but the true battle begins now. We must utilize every advantage we possess, every secret we have guarded for so long. He gestured towards the map. Our greatest strength, the one that the South knows nothing of, lies in the skies. Diana nodded, her gaze firm. The ice dragons. They are our shield, our deterrent, and our weapon. But they must be used wisely, Theon. We cannot reveal their full power too soon. Arthur, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, spoke with a quiet intensity. The ships, too, the cannons, and the wolf pack. They will give us a significant edge at sea, but we must coordinate their use with the dragons. Harrion, ever eager for action, added, we can't just keep the dragons hidden, father. Their presence alone will make the South think twice before attacking. Theon fixed his gaze on Harrion. Aye, but their full power, that is a card we play only when necessary. The fire dragons of the south are a threat, but our ice dragons are more than a match. We must contain them, not provoke them into a full-scale aerial war from the start. He then turned back to the map, his fingers tracing a route along the eastern coast. I have given instructions to Lyra. She is to make her way to the eastern coast with the 3 of the 4 dragons her family have bonded with. Their primary objective is containment. Any fire dragons that approach from the south are to be met and engaged, kept away from our forces and our lands. And William? Arthur asked. Where does he fit into this? William will come here, to Winterfell, Theon replied. He and his bonded dragon will secure the castle, our anchor in the storm to come. He then turned to his sons, his gaze filled with a mixture of pride and concern. Arthur, Harrion, you will take Morgan and move to the western coast. Your task is similar to Lyra's, containment. Protect our western flank, ensure no southern ships or dragons can slip through unnoticed. I will go to Moat Cailin along with the Diana and Wolfpack, Theon said, his voice firm. It is the gateway to the north, and it must be held at all costs. I will be there with my dragon, and Janos and his sons, with their dragons, will join me. We will form the vanguard, the first line of defense against any southern advance. Theon looked at his family, his gaze sweeping over each of them in turn. This war will be unlike any we have faced before. It will be a war of steel and fire, of ice and blood. But we are the North. We are strong, we are resilient, and we are united. We will not yield. We will not break. We will defend our home, our people, and our way of life. The Stark family convened in the solar, the war map their focus. Theon detailed Moat Cailin's defenses. Diana stressed logistics and communication. Arthur analyzed southern tactics and scouting. Harrion proposed using the wolf pack for raids and intelligence. They strategized dragon deployments, naval use, and maintaining secrecy. Hours passed as they meticulously planned, the weight of war heavy but their resolve united. A northern strategy began to form within Winterfell's walls. 10 comments 0 vote. King's Landing 877 AC. King's Landing. Third person POV. 2 days later, within the familiar confines of the small council chamber in the Red Keep, the usual business of the realm was underway. King Jaehaerys presided at the head of the table, his expression thoughtful as Lyman Beesbury detailed the latest trade figures. Suddenly, the heavy oak door creaked open, and a nervous acolyte, clutching a sealed parchment, requested permission to enter. Grand Maester Bennifer, his chains clinking softly, nodded his assent. The acolyte approached the table and presented the letter, its stark white parchment bearing the unmistakable direwolf sigil of House Stark, to the elderly maester. A hush fell over the council as the sigil was recognized. King Jaehaerys, eyes narrowed slightly upon seeing the direwolf. Grand Maester, he said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of anticipation, that will be all. Give the letter to me. Bennifer, his brow furrowed with a flicker of apprehension, carefully handed the Stark missive to the king. All eyes in the chamber followed the exchange, the earlier discussion forgotten as the council members waited to learn the contents of Lord Stark's reply. A tense silence descended upon the small council chamber as King Jaehaerys broke the seal of Lord Stark's letter. His eyes scanned the parchment, moving swiftly across the Northern Lord's words. As he read, a visible transformation swept across the king's face. The initial pallor gave way to a flush of red creeping up his neck and across his cheeks. His jaw tightened, and the red deepened, morphing into a shade of angry purple that spoke volumes of the fury brewing within. His knuckles whitened as his grip on the letter intensified, the parchment crinkling slightly under the pressure. The other council members watched this dramatic shift in the king's countenance with growing unease, sensing the gravity of Lord Stark's response. With a guttural roar that startled the assembled small council, King Jaehaerys slammed his fist onto the polished table, the force of the blow making the inkwells jump. His face, now a deep, furious purple, contorted with rage. He then snatched the letter from his trembling grasp and hurled it across the chamber. The parchment fluttered through the air, landing unceremoniously near the feet of a startled Lyman Beesbury, the master of coin. Insolence. The king bellowed, his voice shaking with unrestrained fury. Utter, unforgivable insolence. His chest heaved with each ragged breath, his violet eyes blazing with a dangerous light. The small council members recoiled slightly, their faces pale with shock at the king's sudden and violent outburst. The usual decorum of the royal council chamber had been shattered by the raw, untamed anger of the Dragon King. Lyman Beesbury, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly, cautiously approached the discarded letter. He bent down, retrieved the crumpled parchment, and with hesitant movements, smoothed it out. His eyes scanned the stark, defiant words scrawled across the page. Clearing his throat, he read aloud to the stunned silence of the small council. N.O. From Theon Stark, King in the North, Lord of Winterfell. The simplicity and outright rejection of Lord Stark's message hung heavy in the air. The boldness of his self-proclaimed title, King in the North, sent a fresh wave of shock through the chamber. The implications of this direct defiance were immense, and the faces of the council members reflected a mixture of disbelief, anger, and a dawning realization of the perilous situation they now faced. A stunned silence hung in the air for a heartbeat after Beesbury read the Stark refusal. Then, as the audacity of Lord Stark's reply sank in, the small council erupted into a cacophony of disbelief and outrage. King in the North. Septon Barth sputtered, his face a mask of righteous indignation. Blasphemy. This is open rebellion. The man dares to usurp the king's title, to declare himself sovereign in his frozen wasteland. Grand Maester Bennifer, his chains clinking with agitation, shook his head in disbelief. Unprecedented. In all my years serving the crown, I have never heard such defiance. This Stark has gone mad with pride. Lord Redwyn, usually more concerned with naval matters, looked aghast. This cannot stand, Your Grace. Such insolence will embolden others. The realm will descend into chaos if we allow this to go unchallenged. Prince Aemon, his brow furrowed with concern, spoke with a more measured tone. Father, this is a grave matter. Lord Stark's defiance, his claim to kingship, it suggests a deep-seated resentment, a belief that his grievances are beyond resolution through peaceful means. Prince Balon, his hand instinctively moving towards his sword hilt, his eyes narrowed with a dangerous glint. There is only one way to answer such defiance, Father. With steel and fire. We must march north and remind these frozen lords who the true king is. Lyman Beesbury, his face pale, wrung his hands nervously. The cost, Your Grace, a war with the North, their lands are vast, their people hardy. It would be a long and bloody affair, draining the royal treasury. Septon Barth slammed his fist on the table. Cost is irrelevant when the very authority of the Iron Throne is challenged. This is not about coin, it is about divine right. Stark must be made to kneel, to beg forgiveness for his treasonous words. Grand Maester Benefer stroked his beard thoughtfully, a worried frown etched on his face. We must consider the implications, Your Grace. The North is not easily conquered. Their winters are their greatest ally. A prolonged war could weaken the realm, leaving us vulnerable to other threats. Lord Redwyn pondered aloud. Their fleet, Lord Manderley commands a considerable number of ships. And what of these rumors of other creatures in the north? Ice dragons, some whisper. Surely mere fanciful tales. Prince Aemon interjected, his voice urgent. Father, before we speak of war, have we truly exhausted all other options? Could we not send envoys, offer terms, understand the root of this defiance? Prince Balon scoffed. Terms. He has declared himself a king. What terms are there to offer a rebel but the edge of a sword? Lyman Beesbury gulped. The other lords paramount, how will they react to this open defiance? Will they see it as an opportunity to assert their own independence? Septon Barth pointed a trembling finger towards the discarded letter. There is no room for parley with such blatant treason. Every moment we delay, Stark's arrogance will only grow. Grand Maester Benefer sighed heavily. This is a dark turn of events, Your Grace. The peace we have strived for, it now hangs by a thread. Lord Redwyn stroked his chin. If these rumors of ice dragons are true, that changes everything. We have no comparable force. Prince Aemon pressed his point. Father, a swift and brutal response might quell this rebellion, but it could also sow seeds of resentment that will fester for generations. We must consider the long-term consequences. Prince Balon stood, his hand now firmly on his sword hilt. Long-term consequences are for historians, Aemon. Now is the time for action. We must crush this rebellion before it spreads. King Jaehaerys, who had remained silent throughout the initial uproar, his face still flushed with residual anger, finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. Silence. The command cut through the frantic discussions, silencing the council once more. All eyes turned to the Dragon King, awaiting his judgment. King Jaehaerys turned his gaze, sharp and decisive, towards Lord Redwyn. Manfred, he commanded, his voice brooking no argument, you will prepare the royal fleet for war. Every ship, every galley, must be made ready to sail north at my command. Furthermore, you will dispatch ravens immediately to houses Velaryon, Hightower, Lannister, Greyjoy, and Arryn. Inform them of the Northern Rebellion and instruct them to ready their own vessels for war. Their fleets will join the Royal Navy. We will descend upon the north with the full might of the sea. He then addressed Septon Barth, his expression stern. Barth, the king stated, send letters to all the Lord Paramounts of the Seven Kingdoms. Inform them of the treasonous actions of House Stark and the necessity of a swift and decisive response. They are to muster their armies and prepare to march. The designated meeting point will be the Twins, and they are to assemble there in 2 moons' time. We will crush this northern rebellion with the combined strength of the south. King Jaehaerys turned his gaze, sharp and decisive, towards Lord Redwyn. Manfred, he commanded, his voice brooking no argument, you will prepare the royal fleet for war. Every ship, every galley, must be made ready to sail north at my command. Furthermore, you will dispatch ravens immediately to houses Velaryon, Hightower, Lannister, Greyjoy, and Arryn. Inform them of the Northern Rebellion and instruct them to ready their own vessels for war. Their fleets will join the Royal Navy. We will descend upon the north with the full might of the sea. He then addressed Septon Barth, his expression stern. Septon, the king stated, your task is equally crucial. Send letters to all the Lord Paramounts of the Seven Kingdoms. Inform them of the treasonous actions of House Stark and the necessity of a swift and decisive response. They are to muster their armies and prepare to march. The designated meeting point will be the Twins, and they are to assemble there in 3 moons' time. We will crush this northern rebellion with the combined strength of the south. Prince Balon, ever the warrior, his hand never straying far from his sword hilt, stepped forward, a suggestion of brutal efficiency in his voice. Father, he began, his gaze intense, why not take our dragons? Fly north and burn their precious Winterfell, their upstart king, just as Aegon the Conqueror did with Harrenhal. A swift, decisive strike would break their spirit before they can even truly rebel. Queen Alysanne, who had remained a silent observer throughout the council's heated discussions, finally spoke, her voice calm and measured, a stark contrast to the fiery pronouncements of her husband and son. Balon, she said, her blue eyes meeting his, even if we possess the strength to burn every keep and castle in the north, what then? Rule over ashes. A kingdom built on fear and hatred is a kingdom destined to crumble. We seek to restore order, not to create a wasteland. King Jaehaerys, though his initial fury had been palpable, considered his queen's words. Alysanne's wisdom had guided him through many difficult decisions over the years, and her counsel often proved sound. He let out a long breath, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. Alysanne speaks truly, he conceded, his gaze softening as he looked at her. Burning the North to the ground would be a victory bought at too high a cost. We seek to bring them back into the fold, not to obliterate them. He then turned back to the assembled council, his earlier resolve now tempered with a more pragmatic approach. The course is set. Manfred, the fleets, Sept and Barth, the letters to the Lord Paramounts. Emmon, Balon, your men must be ready to march within the week. Let no one doubt the Iron Throne's resolve. He paused, his gaze sweeping over them all. Begin your preparations at once. With the king's final instructions given, a sense of grim purpose settled over the small council chamber. The immediate shock and anger had given way to the cold, hard reality of the task ahead. One by one, the members bowed their heads in acknowledgement and began to depart, each carrying the weight of the impending war and the urgency of their assigned duties. The room slowly emptied, leaving King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne alone once more, the silence heavy with the unspoken implications of the path they had now chosen. 30 comments, 0 vote. Ideas. Guys, any suggestions on how the battle should happen? The number count of the army for North and South will be: North, 90,000 soldiers, 150 Eastern Fleet, 150 Western Fleet, 11 Ice Dragons, 1,000 Gaints. COF will not participate in the war. Iron Throne, 210,000 soldiers. Total fleet of 500 ships. 6 dragons. A.N. Forgot about Freefolk. 29 comments, 0 vote. Moat Cailin, 77 AC. Moat Cailin, third person POV. A moon after the Northern Lords declared Theon Stark their king, Moat Cailin became the gathering point for their defiance against the Iron Throne. Banners of numerous northern houses flew above the assembled armies, their grim faces reflecting a unified resolve. While key forces under Manderley Eastern Fleet and Mormont Western Fleet were deployed elsewhere for strategic purposes, a significant host from across the north had answered the call. These seasoned warriors, hardened by the harsh northern climate and fiercely loyal to House Stark, now filled the ancient stronghold. Despite the absence of some major houses, the assembled strength was considerable, a testament to the North's unity. A palpable anticipation hung in the air as they awaited King Theon's arrival and the war strategies he would unveil to defend their land and their newfound independence. Midday sun streamed through the arrow slits of Moat Cailin's ancient towers, illuminating the grim faces of the assembled northern lords. King Theon Stark sat at the head of a long, roughly hewn table in the main hall, his queen, Lyanna Stark, at his side. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, the air heavy with the unspoken weight of the coming war. All the lords who had gathered at the strategic stronghold were present, their attention fixed on their king as they awaited the unveiling of his war plan. The usual boisterous camaraderie of northern gatherings was absent, replaced by a focused intensity, a shared understanding of the gravity of the situation and the fight that lay ahead. Rogar Dustin, leaning over a large map spread across the table, outlined the stark disparity in forces. My lords, he began, his voice clear and measured, let us consider the composition of our armies and those of the Iron Throne. For the north, we have approximately 90,000 soldiers gathered here and spread across our lands. Our Eastern Fleet, under Lord Manderley, numbers around 150 ships, and our Western Fleet, commanded by Lord Mormont, is of similar size, also around 150 vessels. We also have the strength of 1,000 giants, a force unmatched in raw power. It is important to note that the clans of the Mountains of the Moon will not be participating in this conflict. Rogar then shifted his focus to the south. The Iron Throne commands a significantly larger force, estimated to be around 210,000 soldiers. Their total fleet is also far greater than ours, numbering approximately 500 ships. Furthermore, they possess a formidable advantage in the skies: 6 dragons. As Rogar Dustin uttered the word, dragons, a ripple of agitated murmurs spread through the assembled northern lords. The initial grim silence shattered as voices rose in a mixture of defiance and desperate hope. Shot down, Lord Serwyn exclaimed, his youthful face flushed with fervor. The Dornish have done it. Their scorpions brought down dragons during the conquest. We can devise similar weapons. Lord Locke nodded vehemently. Aye, we may not have their sun-baked deserts, but we have ingenuity. Our smiths are skilled. We can forge bolts large enough to pierce a dragon's hide. Another lord, his voice rough and weathered, chimed in, and what of the giants? They possess strength unmatched by any man. Equip them with giant bows, with arrows the size of spears. A volley from them could bring even a dragon crashing from the sky. Theon Stark's voice cut through the room as he spoke. The dragons will not be a problem. Excitement began to bubble through the hall, the daunting reality of facing dragons momentarily overshadowed by the prospect of finding a counter. The lords exchanged fervent glances, their minds racing with possibilities, clinging to any glimmer of hope against the fiery threat from the south. The memory of Dornish resilience against the Targaryen dragons fueled their determination, a belief that the North, too, could find a way to defy the winged beasts. The focus of the discussion shifted from the immediate threat of dragons to the more tangible challenge of defending Moat Cailin against the inevitable southern assault. The lords, their earlier excitement about countering dragons now tempered with the strategic realities of their location, began to offer their expertise on fortification and defense. Lord Glover, whose lands bordered the swamps surrounding Moat Cailin, spoke of the treacherous terrain. The bogs and mire are our first line of defense, he stated, his voice grimly practical. Any army attempting to march through them will be slowed, bogged down, and vulnerable. We must ensure the causeway is heavily defended and any attempts to flank us through the swamps are met with fierce resistance. Lord Tallheart, known for the strength of his fortifications at Torrhen Square, offered his insights. Ensure we have ample reserves of stones and timber to repair any breaches. We should also prepare kill zones along the causeway, maximizing our archers' range and effectiveness. Several other lords contributed ideas, suggesting the placement of sharpened stakes in the bogs, the construction of temporary barricades along the causeway, and the strategic positioning of their own men at arms within the ancient towers. The discussion revolved around maximizing the natural defenses of Moat Cailin, turning its swampy surroundings and narrow approach into a deadly bottleneck for any invading southern army. Theon Stark listened intently, nodding occasionally as the lords offered their counsel. He recognized the importance of a strong defense at Moat Cailin, the gateway to the north. Holding this strategic location would buy them time, wear down the southern forces, and allow their own strategies to unfold. The lords understood this as well, their grim determination evident in their focused discussion of ditches, walls, and kill zones, the unglamorous but vital work of preparing for a war they did not seek but were now determined to win. Theon Stark, who had been listening intently to the defensive strategies being discussed, finally spoke, his voice carrying a note of grim certainty. My lords, he stated, drawing the attention of the assembled council, this war will not be a long, drawn-out affair. A murmur of surprise rippled through the hall. Lord Ricewell, his brow furrowed, voiced the question on many minds. Why do you say that, my king? The South has greater numbers, greater resources. Theon's gaze hardened, his eyes reflecting the cold pragmatism of the North. Because, he replied, his voice low and steady, the Iron Throne cannot afford a prolonged conflict in the North. If they allow this war to drag on, stretching their resources and manpower thin, they risk another threat igniting in their rear. He paused, letting his words sink in. The Dornish, they have never truly bent the knee. They chafe under Targaryen rule. A protracted war in the north, a show of weakness from the Iron Throne, would be an invitation for them to rise again, to reclaim their independence. Jaehaerys knows this. He will want a swift and decisive victory here, to crush our rebellion quickly and turn his attention back to the south before the vipers of Dorne stir. Theon Stark then turned his gaze towards the Lord of Greywater Watch, a man as enigmatic and elusive as his swampy domain. Lord Reed, Theon commanded, his voice carrying a specific weight, you will take 20,000 of the finest trackers and warriors from the Wolf Pack territories and settle them within the bogs and mists surrounding Greywater Watch. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. When the southern armies begin their march north, you are to harass them relentlessly. Disrupt their troops, raid their supply lines, sow chaos in their ranks. You will be the unseen hand that plagues their advance, the nightmare that haunts their every step. They should not know a moment of peace, a single night of undisturbed sleep, from the moment they enter our lands. Then, Theon continued, his gaze sweeping over the assembled lords, outlining the next phase of their strategy. When the southern army inevitably reaches Moat Cailin, we will hold the line. Our fortifications, strengthened as you have suggested, will be our shield. And our cannons, he emphasized, a grim satisfaction in his voice, will be our thunder. We will rain shot and fire upon their ranks, tearing holes in their formations even as they struggle through the swamps. He paused, his eyes glinting with a fierce determination. Once we disrupted their advance, sowing confusion and weakening their numbers, I will lead half of our main host in a sortie. We will strike with the fury of the winter wind, cutting down any stragglers, any wounded left behind. And, his voice took on a sharper edge, if we manage to capture any highborn lords, they will be taken as prisoners. But, he stressed, his gaze hardening, if fate delivers any member of the royal family into our hands, then this war will be over swiftly, before it has truly begun. Janos, Theon then stated, turning to his brother, Ned Umber, Jorah Glover, and the lords from the mountain clans, you will ride with me when the time comes for the sortie. Your strength and ferocity will be crucial in cutting through any remaining resistance. He then addressed Rogar Ricewell and the other lords who had offered their expertise on fortifications. Rogar, Theon said, his gaze firm, you and the other lords with knowledge of siegecraft will be responsible for the fortification of these walls. Ensure every weakness is reinforced, every advantage maximized. And, he added, his eyes glinting with anticipation, when the southern host is within range, you will oversee the firing of our cannons. Let them taste the thunder of the north. A chorus of, "Aye, my king," echoed through the hall of Moat Cailin. A palpable shift occurred as the lords, having heard Theon's strategy, moved with renewed purpose. The initial tension of uncertainty gave way to a grim determination. Orders were barked, men were dispatched, and the work of preparing for the coming storm began in earnest. Theon's plan, though audacious, offered a tangible path forward, and the northern lords, ever pragmatic, embraced the necessary preparations for the inevitable clash with the Iron Throne. The air in Moat Cailin now thrummed with the focused energy of a kingdom preparing for war. 26 comments 0 vote. Twins. 77 AC. Twins. Third person POV. It took 2 moons for the lords sworn to the Iron Throne to assemble at the Twins for war preparation. All the major lords who are participating in the war are in the meeting room. King Jaehaerys I Targaryen presided over a small council meeting. Attending were Lord Corwin Velaryon, Prince Aemon Targaryen, Prince Baelon Targaryen, Lord Tymond Lannister, Lord Roderick Arryn, Lord Glover Tully, Lord Eustace Hightower, Lord Leo Tyrell, Lord Rogar Baratheon, Lord Meryn Greyjoy, Lord Manfred Redwyn, Master of Ships, Ryam Redwyn, and Lord Commander of Kingsguard. The War Council members brought their unique perspectives to the table. The war room at the Twins buzzed with a cacophony of voices as the lords of the South debated their course of action. Maps were spread across the long table, marked with troop movements and potential battlefields. The air was thick with the scent of sweat, wine, and the nervous energy of men on the brink of war. "My lords," boomed Lord Baratheon, his voice carrying over the din, "we cannot rush headlong into the north. We know little of their forces, their defenses. A cautious approach is warranted." Lord Tully nodded in agreement. Indeed, the north is vast, its terrain unforgiving. A prolonged campaign would stretch our resources thin. Perhaps, he suggested, we should send envoys. Attempt negotiations. Negotiate. Lord Lannister scoffed, his lip curling in disdain. With rebels. They've declared themselves independent. Such defiance deserves only one answer: fire and blood. Yet, Lord Arryn countered, his tone measured, is it truly weakness to seek a peaceful resolution? We are the king's vassals, not his butchers. We owe him wise counsel, not blind obedience. Prince Aemon, ever the voice of reason, spoke calmly. Father, a parley would allow us to gauge their strength, understand their terms. It might even prevent unnecessary bloodshed. Surely, that is preferable to the slaughter of thousands. Prince Baelon slammed his fist on the table, his face flushed with anger. They've rejected his rule. There's nothing to negotiate. We crush them, and we crush them swiftly. The debate raged on, voices rising and falling, each lord presenting his own strategic considerations. Some advocated for a swift and overwhelming assault, others for a more measured approach, and still others for a diplomatic solution. King Jaehaerys, who had listened patiently to the cacophony, finally raised his hand, silencing the room. All eyes turned to him, their expressions a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. You speak of caution, of parley, the king said, his voice low but firm. You speak of the costs of war, the strength of the north, and the need for justice. I have heard you all. Very well, we will have a meeting with the enemy. Send word to Starks. Inform them that we are willing to hear their terms, to discuss a peaceful resolution, if one is possible. But, he added, his voice hardening, make it clear that this is not a sign of weakness. We come to this parley with the full strength of the Iron Throne at our back. But let us continue making plans for war, for even with parley, we must be prepared for the worst. The king then turned his attention to the matter at hand. Lord Redwyn, he addressed the Master of Ships, you will command the Eastern Fleet. Your target is White Harbor. Take the city, and you will cut off a vital supply line to the Northmen. He then turned to a grim-faced lord. Lord Greyjoy, you will command the Western Fleet. Your task is to raid the western coasts of the north, sowing chaos and preventing them from concentrating their forces. With the naval strategies in place, the council's attention turned to the main assault. Now, the king said, comes the question of the vanguard. Who will lead the attack on Moat Cailin? Immediately, several voices rose in eager contention. Prince Baelon, ever eager for battle, was the first to speak. I will lead the vanguard, father. It is my right, as a prince of the realm, and I will break those northern dogs. Lord Lannister, his pride wounded, was quick to object. Such an honor should go to the Warden of the West. My men are seasoned warriors, and we will not be denied our place at the front. Lord Baratheon, his voice booming with authority, argued for the strength of the Stormlands. The men of the Stormlands are strong and fierce, and they have a history of facing northern steel. The vanguard should be ours. Lord Tully, surprisingly forceful, declared, "My knights are among the finest in the realm. Riverrun has stood against sieges for centuries, we know how to take a castle. The vanguard should be mine to command." The debate quickly devolved into a cacophony of competing claims, each lord extolling the virtues of his own forces and demanding the honor of leading the vanguard. The room filled with the familiar tension of rivalries and ambition, threatening to undermine the unity of their purpose. As the lords argued, King Jaehaerys remained a study in patience. He allowed them to voice their desires, their pride, and their battle cries, knowing that in this display of martial fervor lay a key to understanding their strengths and weaknesses. Yet, he also knew that such squabbling could not be allowed to fester, lest it disrupt the cohesion of the royal army. Finally, when the din reached its peak, the king raised his hand once more. The chamber slowly quieted, the lords turning their attention to their monarch, their faces flushed with a mixture of anger and anticipation. "Enough," Jaehaerys commanded, his voice firm and resonant. "I appreciate your eagerness, my lords, your desire to serve the realm and to prove your valor. But this is not a matter of personal glory. It is a matter of strategy." He looked at each of the contenders in turn. "Prince Balon, your courage is unquestionable, but you are needed elsewhere. Your command will be crucial in the battles to come, and I cannot risk you in the vanguard." Balon, though clearly disappointed, inclined his head in acceptance. "Lord Lannister," the king continued, "the Westerlands will provide the bulk of our forces, and their discipline is renowned. But your strength lies in organization and logistics, ensuring our armies are well supplied. You will remain at my side." Lord Lannister, though perhaps begrudgingly, also acquiesced. "Lord Baratheon, your men are indeed fierce, and their experience against northern foes is valuable. But the Stormlands must also be ready to defend against any unforeseen threats. Your place is to command the center, the heart of our army." Finally, the king turned to Lord Tully. "Lord Tully, your knights are skilled, and Riverrun's defenses are formidable. But Moat Cailin is not a traditional siege. We need speed, adaptability, and a willingness to fight in treacherous terrain. Therefore, the vanguard will be led by Sir Ryam Redwyn. His skill and experience in leading smaller companies make him ideally suited for this task." The king then addressed his sons, his expression serious. "Aemon, Balon," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "Be prepared to take to the skies. Your dragons may be needed to break the Northmen's resolve. They are stubborn and proud, and this meeting may not go as smoothly as we hope." Turning to face the assembled lords, King Jaehaerys spoke with a grave tone. "My lords, we must bring this conflict to a swift conclusion. We cannot afford a protracted war in the north. Word has reached my ears that Dorne watches our movements with interest. They have long coveted the lands north of the Boneway, and if they sense weakness, they will not hesitate to test our borders." A murmur of concern rippled through the hall. Lord Baratheon, ever vigilant about the southern borders, spoke first. "The Dornish are always a threat, your grace. They are like vipers, striking swiftly and without warning. A war in the north, combined with Dornish incursions, could stretch our forces thin." Lord Tully nodded in agreement. "Indeed. And they have grown bolder in recent years, raiding our marches and harassing our trade routes. They interpret our focus on the north as a sign of weakness." Lord Lannister, ever mindful of the realm's finances, added, "A two-front war would be a disaster. The cost in men and gold would be crippling. We must not allow Dorne to exploit this situation." Then, King Jaehaerys stated, his voice resolute, "The matter is settled. We proceed with both the parley and the war plans, with equal diligence. We send word to Starks, offering a chance for negotiation, but we do so with an army at our back, ready to enforce the king's peace." He looked at each lord in turn, his gaze unwavering. "Let there be no doubt. We seek a resolution that upholds the authority of the Iron Throne and secures the realm. But if the Northmen refuse to bend, then we will show them the true meaning of the dragon's wrath." The assembled lords, finally united in purpose, though still tinged with the uncertainty of what lay ahead, nodded their assent. The plans for both the parley and the war now set, the meeting slowly dissolved. Lords departed to oversee the preparations of their armies and ships, carrying with them the king's words, a mix of hope for peace and the grim determination to wage war if necessary. As the chamber emptied, King Jaehaerys and his sons remained, the weight of the coming conflict etched upon their faces. The parley would soon begin, but whether it would bring peace or merely a brief respite before a bloody war, no one could say. The fate of the Seven Kingdoms hung in the balance, resting on the words and decisions of a few men and women in the far north.